The stun meta is a very hot topic for combat in Space Station 14. Well, to understand the stun meta, we must first understand what a stun is. A stun is anything regarding getting knocked onto the floor in a state where you can't do anything but look. There are a few ways to get into this state. There is stamina crit, which is involving your stamina hitting 0, and there's slipping. For example, if I slip on a normal bar of soap, I'm only stunned for 2 seconds. That's not even enough time to cuff someone. So when people are talking about stuns, they're not going to be really talking about slipping on a normal bar of soap. Sure, you would still drop anything in your hand, and this is a very common thing. If you see an officer open carrying, for example, it's really funny to slip them and steal their firearm. Just don't cry about it when you get shot. However, things get a lot more dangerous when the syndicate get involved, as they always do. If you slip on a syndicate bar of soap, that is more than enough time to put a pair of handcuffs on you, and at that point, you're screwed. Unless you get immediate help from a fellow security officer, of course. Or if you are a syndicate who slips and get cuffed, you want to have freedom implanter. But I'm not going to get into the syndicate side of things. I'm just going to be talking about the meta. And of course, there's things like Omega Soap, a little bit rare. But if you slip on this, you get stunned for a whole 7 seconds. And that is even longer than stamina crit. So you're just at the mercy of whoever sees you slip on that at that point. So that is a slipping, which is basically the same as stamina crit, other than the fact that, well, you didn't lose stamina, so you just instantaneously get stunned. So if you see an Omega Soap and you aren't paying attention, technically you just got stamina crit instantaneously, which is faster than any form of non-lethal stamina crit in this game, other than Lick Oxide, but that's not really a stun, that's kind of somewhere in between. Again, I'm not going to be going fully into detail of everything because that'd be a 20-year-long video. This is just explaining the stun meta. Soaps have a hard counter. It's called the walk key. If you have your walk key on a toggle and you know somebody's trying to slip you a soap, if you're walking, they will never be able to slip you with this because unless it's lube, you can walk through it. But people can't exactly surprise attack you with lube easily, and if they do, they will have to have no slips to be able to do anything to you directly, so that would pretty much out them as a syndicate immediately if you see somebody throw lube at you and then run on it and not slip. So that is just something worth considering. That is slip combat. Now we'll move on to the bread and butter security weapons, which the Disabler SMG was just added, and of course everyone knows the stun baton. The stun baton is the easiest stun weapon in the game to explain. It swings once a second, and it will stamina crit you in 3 swings. 1, 2, 3. If you're taking active stamina damage, you will not regenerate stamina. Once you take 100 stamina damage, you will fall into a stamina crit, which is 6 seconds of not being able to do anything on the floor, meaning that you can get handcuffed pretty quickly, or just straight up executed, as is a common form of combat for security fighting lethal threats. The Disabler does 30 stamina damage a shot, and it shoots at 2 a second, meaning that if you land all your shots perfectly, you will actually be able to stam crit somebody faster than with a stun baton. One thing that is worth mentioning, which I haven't brought up at this point, is the second you take 50 stamina damage, you lose more than half your speed. Take a look at the current sprint modifier. If I shoot them twice, you can see they lose a ton of movement speed for a short duration. And of course, you will regenerate a little bit of stamina, but if you immediately take stamina damage back over 50, you will lose all that movement speed again. So you can get slowed down multiple times depending on how a fight goes due to how the stamina thresholds work. Getting somebody to 50 stamina damage is the hardest part. As soon as you get them to 50, it's rather easy to finish someone off who's moving slower than a walking speed. You're basically rooted in place the second you take 50 stamina damage. This is a tech item though. The Disabler SMG is research based, but it actually has an even faster time to stun if you don't miss. Each shot of the Disabler SMG does 15 stamina damage, so that means you actually have to land 4 shots in order to get them to get to that 50% slowdown. So that means you have to land most of your shots immediately in order to get them to be able to be easily hit. And if they even recover a single point of stamina, you're gonna have to land another Disabler shot. But if you are somebody who is very accurate and you're like at this range, you would disable somebody faster with this than either a stun baton or a disabler, and it has a pretty large magazine or battery. I guess battery is a better term. It has 30 shots compared to the normal disabler. So you can actually disable more people at once with a disabler SMG than a normal disabler before you have to recharge. So that makes a disabler SMG pretty much better in every situation. The only time that wouldn't be as good, and this is hard to show off in combat, is if somebody's actually shooting back at you. The disabler is much better for peak combat. AD strafing is certainly not a new concept in gaming. Now we'll compare the MK58. Sec officers start with one non-lethal mag and one lethal mag. This will probably be the most common weapon you'll be run into, or the most common weapon you'll see used, because of just how many there are. A non-lethal shot from an MK58 does 22 stamina damage. That means only 3 bullets will get you over that 50 threshold to slow you, and it only takes 5 bullets to put you into the 6-second stam crit. The MK58 shoots at 5 bullets a second, meaning that you can perfectly time to kill, put somebody in a stam crit in 1 second, and that's regardless of their armor. A Juggernaut would fall just as easily as a naked man. With lethal bullets, we can just do simple math. It does 16 damage a shot, meaning you'll need 7 shots to crit a perfectly healthy unarmored target, meaning that it's a 1.4 second time to kill. So even against a naked person at full health, the lethal bullets have a significantly worse time to kill and requires more of a tiny magazine in order to do so. However, it is worth mentioning that if you take 60 damage, you will lose some movement speed, which I could just put on screen to show you. People may not be aware of this. Once you take 60 damage, you lose some movement speed permanently until you heal it back. As you can see, we're down to 3.1 from 4.5 movement speed, and as soon as you take 80 damage, you drop even further. Getting somebody that hurt is, they're probably already having different issues, but it is worth mentioning that it does get easier to hit targets the closer they are to death. So it's hard to calculate. I can't just give you a number of how effective that actually is in combat compared to stuns. But it is always worth mentioning that regardless of armor, regardless of health, it's basically stamina damage is basically true damage. So having a guaranteed known shots to stam crit somebody is pretty useful. There are things you can do to circumvent how much stuns actually affect you. You could always inject something like ephedrine, which gives you stun recovery time, but it doesn't give you more stamina, meaning that an MK58 will still stam crit you in 1 second. But the thing is, it helps you recover from stuns fast enough that almost all people will not be able to cuff you in time, but you would still drop your weapon on the ground. So even a souped up Nuki on ephedrine would still drop their weapon. And as I've said, a very common strategy is to just stamina crit somebody and take their weapon and just kill them with it. Because A, even if you don't kill them before they stand back up, you just took their weapon from them. And B, if it's something like Nukis, they are almost guaranteed to have weapons stronger than yours. And using it against them is obviously very powerful because it takes a weapon away from a Nuki and they can't fight back. Even if they recover instantly, they will then have to cycle through their inventory to pull out another weapon while you have their weapon in your hand. So it just gives you such a big advantage even in combat, even if your purpose isn't to arrest them. Really, one of the only options you have as a Syndicate agent to counter stuns is actually use an energy dagger or energy sword. They have a 25% chance each to deflect bullets, and if a bullet is deflected, it does no stamina damage, but also does no physical damage. So this lowers the time to kill of both guns, theoretically by 25%, because if you reflect 25% of the shots, then you're not taking that damage or stamina damage. So that's pretty much Syndicate Agent's only real option of avoiding the stun meta yourself getting stunned. Obviously, you can have things like a hollow parasite to punch people trying to cuff you at least, but again, combat in this game is actually pretty in-depth a lot of the time. Even stun meta isn't a straightforward thing. There's a lot of things that go into it besides just raw stats. And if you want to get into the real crazy stuff, the Captain's Sword is actually even better. So if you manage to steal the Captain's Sword or you are the Captain, this reflects 50% of bullets. So if you just have this in your offhand while doing anything, it will make it significantly harder to actually put you into a stamina crit, and obviously in a real crit, because it reflects 50% of all projectiles. So yeah, just something worth considering is that some weapons have reflect. The energy dagger is really cheap, and 25% increased effective HP is really strong. Obviously it's only against projectiles, and 50% is crazy, but there's only one Captain's Sword, and well, if you're killing the captain, you probably already know what you're doing anyways. So now we'll move on to the beefier guns in the game, and this is where stat disparity and the stun meta starts becoming more alive. Shotguns are actually pretty good about this. They have the fastest time to kill, non-lethal and lethally. All shotguns shoot 2 a second. But beanbags are crazy. One shot from a beanbag puts you over 50 stamina damage, meaning that the second you get hit by a beanbag, you are slow to a crawl. So getting a follow-up shot is very easy, and it will crit you in 2 shots. They didn't crit there because I didn't shoot them immediately, and you recover stamina naturally all the time as long as you're not taking stamina damage. So unless you dodge every single beanbag and only get hit by the last one, you're pretty much guaranteed to get stam crit. The Enforcer with beanbags is by far the scariest thing to run into as a Nuki or honestly any form of antagonist. It does okay damage, they do 10 blunt, and they just knock you to the ground. What's a really common strategy is you put in 3 beanbags or 4 beanbags, and you just shoot them. You shoot your target until they're in a stam crit, and you just keep shooting until you basically execute them with lethals. And it only takes 2 buckshot shots. Each buckshot does 60 damage. They did just get nerfed, but if you do the math, you land all the pellets, you will still crit an unarmored target in 2 shots. That means shotguns actually have the same time to kill, in quotes, if a target is unarmored, because they both will either stam crit or just crit without missing any pellets in 2 shots. And if you land every single pellet of the first lethal, you will put them into that slowdown phase until they heal. But the beanbags put you in the slowdown phase immediately, which is only temporary because stamina, as I've explained. I don't want to overcomplicate this too much. Beanbags especially are just by far the strongest bullets in the game. Getting slowed instantly and then knocked to the ground for 6 seconds after 2 shots, especially on Enforcers which have a large tube, you can very, very easily, predictably get a good stam crit off and then just execute your target. The Enforcer is probably the strongest gun in the game for security, and subsequently the Bulldog is probably the strongest gun in the game for Nukis and Syndicates, because that comes with beanbags and lethals. So even a Syndicate with an automatic Bulldog can just 2-shot stun a Sec Officer and then just execute them. The droid uses the same bullets as the MK58, but it actually shoots faster. That means a non-lethal droid can actually stam crit you faster than 1 second. So, like, there's basically no real reaction speed to that. Most melee weapons in the game are 6 or 7 seconds to crit you, where a submachine gun with non-lethals at point blank will put you into a stam crit state regardless of your armor in less than a second. There's a very large disparity because even with as fast as it shoots, a normal droid still with lethal bullets will still take more than a second to crit a healthy target that's unarmored. As soon as you start throwing an armor, it takes almost an entire magazine of a droid to crit a Juggernaut suit, for example, where you would still be able to stamina crit a Juggernaut in less than a second with non-lethals. And then you could just execute them in that 6 seconds when they're on the floor. It's a lot easier to kill somebody who isn't fighting back. The WT-550 shoots at the same speed as the MK58 and has the same bullets, so there's no real point in comparing it. And finally, we can compare the Lecter of the more common guns in the game for non-lethals. The Lecter shoots 20 rifle bullets, which does 1 more damage, meaning that the Lecter will actually crit an unarmored target in 6 bullets instead of 7, but the fire rate's only 5, so it's still over a second. And the amount of bullets you have to land for rubbers is still 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has a 1 second time to crit, stam crit, as the MK58, but it has a much larger magazine, so it's better than the MK58. Magazine size is really, really important in this game. The only bullets in the game that are like stun bullets are 45 Magnum armor piercing. Only Syndicates can even get access to these. But due to how armor piercing works, it will always do 26 piercing, and the Python shoots 2 a second. So that means you can crit anyone, regardless of armor, in 4 bullets or 2 seconds. And you can get rubber bullets for it. It's just a tech. So if I just dispense 4 of them, just for the show, just like the armor piercing bullets, 1, 2, 3, even for the Python, which has true damage bullets basically, you can still crit anyone faster than that with only 3 rubber bullets. Obviously, though, this is the case where you probably don't want to ever really use rubbers if you're a Syndicate. Why not just go for the extra bullet to get a kill on anyone regardless? Like, you can 4-shot kill the Captain, you can 4-shot kill the Grey Tider. That's actually probably why the Python isn't that enticing of an option, is that you feels like you're wasting damage potential shooting a naked person, but it also has the highest potential where you could even four-shot a death squad member if you're ever in that scenario. If you're in that scenario, it's already an interesting scenario anyway. And much like shotguns, the 45 Magnum, which the detective spawns with, actually does 35 damage a shot. So against an unarmored target, you would actually crit them in 3 bullets, just like you would stam crit them when 3 bullets with rubber bullets. So the Inspector really doesn't have this issue. Again, until you run into armored targets, then you'd be better off having rubbers. So much like shotguns, they're kind of balanced the same way. They have essentially a 3-second time to, or they essentially have a 2-second time to kill, because it shoots 1.5 bullets a second, and it takes 3 seconds to crit unarmored and stam crit anyone in 3 seconds. I'm sorry, I'm sure this is pretty wordy, but I'm talking about a meta here anyway, so I don't know why you'd click on a meta video not expecting somebody to nerd out about gun stats. That is pretty much all the forms of stuns in the game. Another one that is worth mentioning that is actually accessible to syndicates, I really don't see a Nuki ever wanting to do this, is you could, there is always Nocturn, and Nocturn, if you walk up and inject somebody with it, it isn't a stun, but it puts them asleep. It's basically, it's less than a second. It's just like getting beanbagged, but it's obviously a lot quieter. And at this point, again, you can cuff them, kill them, execute them. But it does require to be in point-blank melee range, so even then, still nowhere near as good as having rubbers, but it's kind of silent. So it's comparable, but not quite. But you can use it in combat. I mean, you can literally do this. If you're in a hectic scenario, you can right-click somebody and click their name to basically guarantee you won't mess up your injection. So Hypopen Nocturne is a really strong combat combo, and used to be a lot more prevalent in this game, but that has gotten changed recently, because the Hypopen has been nerfed since then. Before, you used to be able to put somebody to sleep basically instantaneously, and with less Nocturne. There used to be one-click stun. So stun meta in this game has actually gotten further away from stuns because of this. Just some history for you. Stun batons used to one-hit stun back when I started playing, and there was tasers that had 5 shots that would one-shot stun you. So the stun meta is nowhere near as aggressive as it used to be, but it is still by far the best combat tool in the game. Pretty much all high-tier combat between the really skilled players comes to who has their stun weapons ready and who's making better use of their stun weapons. Pretty much all murders start off with a stun weapon. Some other forms of stun weapons that are worth mentioning is the rigged boxing gloves. This is another weapon that's of high controversy in the community. The gloves actually do 8 damage a hit, but that's not what makes them OP. Each hit does 34 stamina, so 2 hits is enough to slow you down, and then the 3rd hit puts you in stam crit, and you attack faster with this than a stun baton, so it's basically a better stun baton that does damage. It's easily one of the strongest weapons in the game, and what's crazy about it is that they're gloves, so even if you were to get stunned, you won't even drop your gloves, and if you run something like a freedom implanter, you can get stunned, get cuffed, and if they don't execute you right there on the spot, you could just freedom implant and just beat the shit out of the officer arresting you, and there's pretty much nothing they'll be able to do about it. I'm just putting them in a Jug suit, which a Juggernaut suit reduces piercing damage by 80%. The Droist, even when they're in the tankiest suit of armor and normally acquirable in the game, will still put them on the floor at less than 1 second. If we take a Droist that's lethal with all 30 bullets in a magazine, remember it shoots 6 bullets a second, so if we just sit here and literally point blank mag dump them, even with all 31 bullets, we still weren't able to crit a full health Juggernaut suit, so I have to pull out another Droist. So it took 35 bullets from a Droist, which these bullets do 16 piercing a shot. It basically takes about 6 full seconds with lethal bullets to crit a Juggernaut, where it takes less than 1 second to stam crit them with the same gun with rubber bullets. So basically, if you were to just have the first 8 or so bullets of your droids be rubber bullets, just so you have a few extra to miss, and point blank stun them and just keep mag dumping them, that would let you essentially kill them much, much faster than if you were to ever even attempt to just get in a gunfight with them. Obviously, you are much more likely to die first. I hate the term meta in a game like this because it's a role play game primarily, but it is just the most effective way of winning combat. So I will agree that the stun meta is a thing. Maybe it's a good thing though. There's more to stun meta than just combat. That's all I got for you. Apologies for the long-winded conversation here, but I just want people to be informed about stun meta and be able to make better decisions. So as a very last closing note, stun ammo and stun weapons are your friend, either Syndicate or Security. They will not let you down. Knowing exactly how many shots it takes to put somebody in a stamina crit situation is very important, and knowing how to avoid stuns of your own is also very important. Thank you for watching.